All right, former President Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance packed an Atlanta arena Saturday with supporters. Trump renewed his personal attacks on Vice President Harris at the rally, mocking again the pronunciation of her first name, insulting her intelligence, and calling her a phony. And it wasn't just Harris who Trump ridiculed. The former president also went after the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp.
Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris spent her Saturday meeting with her vetting team to go over potential candidates for vice president. Today, she will meet with the finalists in her search for a running mate, with sources telling CNN a renewed focus has been placed on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Now, she will continue face-to-face interviews with these final contenders and will likely not announce her final decision before her Tuesday night rally with her running mate in Philadelphia. For more on all of this, CNN's Elena Treen has the latest from Trump's Atlanta rally last night.
Well, Amra and Danny, former President Donald Trump on Saturday leaned in to his attacks on Vice President Kamala Harris and really tried to test drive new lines of those attacks as well, all as he's continuing to try and find the best way to define her. At one point, he even kind of said the quiet part out loud and said, "We have to try to define her." I want you to take a listen to what he said.
You know, 4 months ago, she was considered grossly incompetent by the fake news. Now they're saying, oh, isn't she wonderful? Isn't she wonderful? No, she's not wonderful. So we have to work hard to define her. I don't want to even define her. I just want to say who she is. She's a horror show. She'll destroy our country.
Now, Danny and Amra, I found that really interesting because it matches up with what I've been hearing from Donald Trump's advisors, which is they're trying to still figure out the best way to go after Harris. And of course, they've spent their entire campaign thus far focusing on Joe Biden, not Harris. And he's really trying to figure out what works with the crowd, what the energy is like in the room. And we saw that on Saturday night. Now, we also heard him really go after Harris for having entertainers at her own rally here in Atlanta. Also, at the same exact rally just earlier in the week, she had performers like Megan Thee Stallion perform, and Donald Trump said that he didn't like that he found it, quote, phony. Now, we know that line, phony, is something that he is continuing to try and work into his own speeches and try to paint Harris as someone who is fake. He also attempted to tie Harris to his former opponent, Hillary Clinton. He argued that Clinton had Bruce Springsteen performed for her back in the lead up to 2016, and he said he never would forget that. He also went on to say, I have a bad trait, and that is I only like people who like me. Now, another very notable thing, Danny and Amra, is that he repeatedly went after the Georgia Republican governor, Brian Kemp, as well as the state's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. And remember, they both were very key to the 2020 election and ensuring that Georgia's elections weren't rife with fraud, something that they have said repeatedly. Donald Trump called Kemp disloyal multiple times. And I think I should note here that Kemp had not supported Donald Trump in the primary, but later went on to say that he would support him in November. Amra, Danny?
Elena Treen, thank you very much. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, acknowledged in a statement to CNN that he had an affair during his first marriage.
This comes after a British tabloid published alleged details of this relationship, and CNN's Priscilla Alvarez has the story.
Vice President Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, acknowledged to CNN that he had an affair during his first marriage after alleged details of that relationship were published in a British tabloid. In a statement exclusively to CNN, Emhoff said the following, quote, during my first marriage, Kirsten and I went through some tough times on account of my actions. I took responsibility, and in the years since, we worked through things as a family and have come out stronger on the other side. Now, that tabloid, the Daily Mail, reported that Emhoff had a relationship with his then young daughter's teacher, which resulted in the end of his first marriage. Now, sources tell CNN the relationship and the circumstances were disclosed to Joe Biden's vetting committee 4 years ago when Kamala Harris was being considered the running mate. Now, we were also told by sources that Emhoff had told Harris about the affair before they got married as well. Now, Emhoff's 2 children are now adults, and the family dynamic has been described as a friendly one, with the ex-wife Kirsten Emhoff also weighing in on Saturday, saying, quote, he is a great father to our kids, continues to be a great friend to me, and I am really proud of the warm and supportive blended family Doug, Kamala, and I have built together. Doug Emhoff has been on the campaign trail, and that is expected to pick up over the next few weeks and months.
All right, Priscilla Alvarez, thank you very much. Joining me now is political reporter for Bloomberg, Stephanie Lai. Good morning to you, Stephanie. Thanks so much for being with us. Let's start with the Trump-Vance rally at the Georgia State University Convocation Center. And Trump's words, once again, were, "We have to work hard to define her." I mean, he's acknowledging here that they're struggling to craft a message to blunt the VP's momentum. And we're just, 90-some days out from the election.
I think that's a really good point because in a lot of ways, Kamala Harris's entrance into the race was unexpected. You know, for months, people had been saying that they wouldn't swap her in because she has low favorability. But the moment she got in the race, it seemed like there was a new breath of life in the Democratic Party. And so for the Trump campaign, it's really quintessential for them to be able to blunt that momentum, to, sort of paint her in a certain way that will dissuade independent voters, swing state voters, anyone who might have been on the fence on either Trump or Biden and might now be feeling more that they're leaning towards Harris. And I think that rally yesterday night really painted that clear because in a lot of ways, in the last couple of weeks, Republicans have been sort of tinkering with different ideas. How do we really get the voters to recognize what Kamala Harris's brand is, right? And so at first, some Republicans had been trying to paint her as a DEI candidate, and many warned that that might not sit well with voters. And so really right now, the goal is to figure out what policies, what sort of attack lines will really resonate with voters.
All right. Well, they've got a shortened timeline, so they got to figure that out fast. So, of course, Trump veered off message during his speech, and instead of fully focusing on his opponent, he tore into the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp, who was conspicuously absent, by the way. And before the rally, he was also going off on Truth Social about Brian Kemp and his wife. Here's just some of the back and forth. Listen.
Atlanta is like a killing field, and your governor ought to get off his ass and do something about it. He's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor.
Okay, and the Governor Kemp responded with this post on X saying, "My focus is on winning this November and saving our country from Kamala Harris and the Democrats, not engaging in petty personal insults, attacking fellow Republicans, or dwelling on the past. You should do the same, Mr. President, and leave my family out of it." I'm surprised to hear from Elena Trine that Kemp is saying he will still vote for Trump this November. But Trump attacking the popular governor of a key battleground state, I mean, that could backfire.
It was kind of unexpected from this last rally. I'm not going to lie. It seems like the whole point was to paint Kamala Harris in a certain light, and having this 5 to 10 minute tangent didn't really match with the rest of the rally. But of course, we do know the former president and his tendencies, and so this in some ways is him rehashing some of his past gripes. A lot of strategists have been saying that this might not play well because a lot of headlines today are really focusing on his past vendetta with the governor instead of, all the things that he said about Kamala Harris. So it sort of veered away from the campaign message, but, it's not that out of the ordinary.
Yeah, and what's not out of the ordinary is to also hear Trump say it's my way or the highway, this time referring to the debate during that rally. He said he will only debate Kamala Harris on Fox News on September 4th. I mean, do you see a scenario where there might not be a debate at all, and instead Trump using the airtime on Fox to, do his one-on-one interview, and Kamala Harris doing the same thing on ABC News?
It's very possible. We've already seen President Trump decide not to do debates throughout the primary. And so he already has a strategy on what to do if there is no such debate. But it is a very different message than what they've been sending before, which is that we do want to ensure that the American public has the ability to see these two candidates side by side. But of course, they were saying earlier that they're waiting for Kamala Harris to become the Democratic nominee because there was no guarantee up until she was actually nominated. And so the debate over debate continues, and we'll see if anything comes from that. But as of now, it seems like we're sort of at an impasse.
Okay, and now to the Veep stakes. Lastly, Tuesday, we will see Harris with her running mate at their first rally together in Philadelphia. As we understand it, the vice president is meeting with at least 3 VP contenders today, and that would be the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, governor of Minnesota Tim Walz, and of course Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Our reporting here on CNN is that there is renewed focus on Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. What would he bring to the ticket, especially when Minnesota is not a swing state, which has, voted solidly Democratic for over 50 years?
I think you have a good point in that he might not serve the same electoral advantage that, say Josh Shapiro might bring to the ticket. But in a lot of ways, he brings that Southern charm that voters feel that the vice president doesn't necessarily have or doesn't appeal to. And so if they're able to gather a ticket that brings together, folks from the Northeast corridor, from California, these coastal areas, as well as, the rest of the country, that could bring together a unity ticket that Democrats are looking for.